Title: The Captive Orchid and the Iron Dragon. Listen to the sound of the rain. Imagine it falling against the dark, curved clay tiles of the Imperial Palace. Heavy, cold, and unrelenting. Down below, in the sprawling stone courtyard, there is a man kneeling in the mud. His silver armor is shattered, his long dark hair is plastered to his pale face, and a slow trail of blood runs from the corner of his lips. This is Prince Rong, the last surviving royal of the fallen Kingdom of Wei. And standing above him, holding a blood-stained sword, is the man who conquered his home, Prince Jin of the Great Yan Empire, the Iron Dragon, a man known to be as cold and unfeeling as the frozen peaks of the north. But if you looked closely, if you were standing right there in the rain, you would see that Prince Jin's hand is trembling, just slightly, not from fatigue, but from the overwhelming, terrifying urge to drop his sword, pull the ruined enemy prince into his arms, and hide him from the world. Before we step fully into the shadows of the Imperial Palace, I want to say something quickly. If you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18+ Ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper, darker, and more intense versions of these stories are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. Come join us, and let's experience the full story together. Now, let us return to the rain. The war had raged for 3 long years. 3 years of blood, steel, and fire. Prince Rong was a brilliant commander, a fierce warrior whose beauty was only matched by his lethal grace on the battlefield. But his kingdom was small, and the Yan Empire was a massive, crushing machine. When the capital of Wei finally fell, Rong refused to run. He stood at the palace gates alone, his twin swords drawn, cutting down Yan soldiers until his muscles tore and his breath tasted like copper. He expected to die. He wanted to die with his people. But Prince Jin did not let him. When Jin rode through the burning gates on his massive black warhorse, the fighting stopped. The Yan soldiers parted like the sea. Jin dismounted, his dark eyes locking onto Rong. There was no hatred in Jin's gaze, only a strange, heavy intensity. A dark obsession that had been brewing for 3 years, ever since they first crossed swords on a distant battlefield. Rong had lunged at him, a desperate final strike, but Jin had effortlessly parried, stepping inside Rong's guard, disarming him, and slamming him against the burning wooden gates. "Kill me," Rong had hissed, his chest heaving, his face inches from Jin's. Jin had stared down at his lips, then up to his fiery, defiant eyes. "No," Jin whispered, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble that sent a shiver down Rong's spine. "You are mine now. My ultimate spoil of war." And so, Rong was chained and dragged back to the Yan capital, not as a prince, but as a prisoner, a trophy for the cruel emperor of Yan. The journey took weeks. Rong was kept in a wooden cage in the center of the army's convoy. It was meant to humiliate him, to break his spirit, but Rong sat with his spine perfectly straight, his eyes closed, refusing to give them the satisfaction of his pain. Every night, when the camp was entirely quiet, Jin would walk past the cage. He never spoke. He never gloated. He would just stand there in the moonlight, a silent sentinel, his dark eyes tracing the delicate lines of Rong's face, the sharp slope of his jaw, the pale throat that he had spared. Rong could feel that gaze. It was heavy, hot. It burned through the cold night air, making Rong's breath hitch, though he never opened his eyes to acknowledge it. The tension between them was like a pulled bowstring, ready to snap. When they finally arrived at the imperial capital, the true nightmare began. The imperial court of Yan was a viper's nest of gold and silk. The emperor sat on his high throne, a cruel, laughing man who loved nothing more than breaking beautiful things. Beside him stood the crown prince, Jin's older brother, a vain and jealous man who hated Jin's military success. Rong was dragged into the grand throne room, his chains echoing loudly against the polished jade floor. "Kneel," a guard barked, kicking the back of Rong's knees. Rong stumbled, but forced himself back up. He lifted his chin, his bruised and beautiful face radiating pure, untouched pride. "I kneel only to the heavens, the earth and my ancestors," Rong said, his voice ringing clear through the massive hall, "not to a butcher." The court gasped. The emperor's face darkened with fury. "Cut the tendons in his legs," the emperor commanded lazily. "Let us see if he can stand then." 2 guards drew their blades, stepping toward Rong. Rong closed his eyes, bracing for the agony. But the blades never struck. A sharp, metallic clang echoed through the room. Rong opened his eyes to see Prince Jin standing in front of him, his own sword drawn, having knocked the guards' weapons away. The entire court went dead silent. The crown prince sneered. Little brother, what is the meaning of this? Are you defying imperial father for a defeated slave? Jin did not look at his brother. He didn't even look at the emperor. He looked over his shoulder, right at Rong. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was a fierce, protective shadow in them. This man is my spoil of war, Jin said, his voice echoing like thunder in the silent hall. I conquered his lands, I broke his army, his life belongs to me, I will not have my prize ruined by common guards. The emperor leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You claim him, Jin. I do, Jin replied smoothly, sheathing his sword. I will take him into my household. I will break his pride myself. Let him be my personal attendant. The court murmured in shock. An enemy royal? A dangerous assassin? Placed in the inner chambers of a prince? It was madness. But the emperor threw his head back and laughed. Very well. The emperor declared, Keep your dangerous pet, Jin, but if he bites you, do not come crying to me. That night, Rong found himself not in a damp dungeon, but in a quiet, secluded pavilion within Prince Jin's massive private estate. The room was beautiful. Sliding paper doors opened up to a moonlit bamboo garden. There was a low table, hot tea, and clean silk robes. Rong stood in the center of the room, staring at the silk. He didn't understand. Was this a trick? A new kind of torture? The sliding door opened softly. Jin stepped inside. He had removed his heavy armor, wearing only simple, dark blue robes. Without the armor, he looked less like a monster of war, and more like a man. A very large, very dangerous man, but just a man. Rong instantly backed away, his body tense, looking around for a weapon. Finding none, he raised his fists. Jin sighed, closing the door behind him. Sit down, Rong. I am not here to fight you. Then what are you here for? Rong spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and anger. Why did you save me today? Why bring me here? Just kill me and get it over with. Jin walked slowly across the room. He didn't stop until he was standing just inches away from Rong. Rong refused to back down, tilting his head up to meet Jin's gaze. He could feel the heat radiating off Jin's chest. He could smell sandalwood, rain, and a faint hint of steel. Jin reached out. Rong flinched, but Jin's hand only bypassed his face, gently pulling a loose, dirty strand of hair behind Rong's ear. His fingers brushed against the sensitive skin of Rong's neck. Rong's breath hitched. A shiver ran violently down his spine. If I wanted you dead, Jin whispered, his voice low, intimate, and dangerously soft, you would have died at the gates of your city. You are in my home now. No one will touch you here. You are safe. I am your prisoner, Rong whispered back, his heart pounding in his chest like a trapped bird. Yes, Jin agreed, his eyes dropping to Rong's lips for a fraction of a second before meeting his eyes again. You are, and you will not leave this estate. But you will not be chained. Now, bathe, drink the tea, sleep. Jin stepped back, the sudden loss of his body heat leaving Rong feeling strangely cold. Before Rong could say another word, Jin turned and walked out into the night, sliding the door shut. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Life in the Iron Dragon's estate was nothing like Rong expected. He was supposedly a servant, an attendant, but Jin never made him do any actual labor. Instead, Rong found himself shadowing the cold prince. He sat in the corner of Jin's study while Jin read military reports. He poured his tea, he walked with him through the plum blossom gardens in the dead of winter, and the silence between them began to change. It was no longer a silence of hatred. It became a silence of intense, unbearable observation. Rong found himself watching the way Jin's strong hands held a calligraphy brush. He noticed the slight furrow in Jin's brow when he was tired. He realized that the cold prince was entirely isolated. Jin had no friends. His family hated him, using him only as a weapon to win wars while plotting to discard him. One late evening, a heavy winter snowstorm trapped them inside the main study. Only a few candles lit the room, casting long, flickering shadows against the rice paper walls. Jin was reading a scroll, but his eyes hadn't moved in 10 minutes. Rong was kneeling across the low table, grinding ink. The rhythmic, circular motion of the inkstone was the only sound in the quiet room. You're holding the brush too tight, Rong said suddenly, breaking the silence. Jin looked up, surprised. He glanced down at his hand, realizing his knuckles were white. He set the brush down with a sigh, rubbing his temples. The northern borders are restless. The emperor wants me to march again in the spring. Rong paused his grinding. You shouldn't go. Jin raised an eyebrow, a faint, rare smirk playing on his lips. Is the great tactician of Wei offering me military advice? I am offering you survival advice, Rong retorted, his dark eyes flashing. Your brother, the Crown Prince, controls the supply lines to the north. If you march, he will delay your grain shipments. You won't be defeated by the enemy. You'll starve in the snow. It's a trap. Jin stared at him. The air in the room seemed to thicken. He knew it was a trap. He had known for days, but the fact that Rong, his prisoner, his enemy, had seen it and was warning him. Jin slowly stood up. He walked around the low table, his tall frame blocking out the candlelight. He knelt right in front of Rong. They were so close that their knees were almost touching. "Why do you care?" Jin asked softly. Rong swallowed hard. He looked down at the inkstone, unable to meet Jin's intense gaze. "I don't care. I don't want to see a good general die a stupid death." Jin reached out, placing his large, calloused hand over Rong's. Rong's hand froze on the inkstone. Jin's fingers slowly slipped between Rong's, intertwining them. The touch was electric. Rong felt a rush of heat flood his chest, his breath catching in his throat. "Look at me, Rong," Jin murmured. Rong slowly lifted his eyes. Jin's face was mere inches away. The cold, ruthless mask of the Iron Dragon was completely gone, replaced by a raw, naked hunger that made Rong's head spin. Jin leaned in. Rong closed his eyes, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. He could feel Jin's breath on his lips. He leaned forward, just a fraction of an inch, entirely surrendering to the pull. Bang. The sliding doors were thrown open by a panicked guard. Both men snapped apart, Rong almost knocking over the inkstone as he scrambled backward, his face burning hot. "Your Highness," the guard gasped, falling to his knees. "Forgive the intrusion, but an urgent decree has arrived from the palace. The Emperor demands your presence at the spring banquet tonight, and he commands that you bring the Wei Prince with you." Jin's expression instantly turned to ice. He stood up, his hands balling into fists. "Prepare my carriage." The spring banquet was a glittering nightmare. The grand hall of the imperial palace was overflowing with nobles, concubines, and ministers, all dripping in gold and jade. Music played, dancers twirled in silk ribbons, and wine flowed like water. Rong was forced to kneel slightly behind Jin's low table, dressed in a beautiful but degrading sheer white silk robe that the palace had sent him. It was meant to mock him, to make him look like a common concubine rather than a prince. Every eye in the room was on them. Whispers hissed through the hall like snakes. "Look at the fallen prince. How pathetic. Prince Jin has tamed the wild dog of Wei." Rong kept his eyes fixed on the wooden floor, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He would not let them see him break. He would not. But Jin was practically vibrating with rage. He sat completely stiff, his hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. Every time a noble looked at Rong with lust or mockery, Jin's eyes snapped toward them with a murderous glare, forcing them to quickly look away. The crown prince, drunk on sweet wine, stood up from his seat near the emperor. He held a golden cup, stumbling slightly as he walked down the steps toward Jin's table. "Ah, my dear little brother," the crown prince slurred, his face flushed. "You have kept your little pet hidden away for too long. He is quite beautiful, isn't he? A shame he is wasted on a brute like you." Jin didn't speak. His eyes were dark, dangerous voids. The crown prince stopped in front of their table. He looked down at Rong with a sickening smile. "You slave, pour me a cup of wine." Rong didn't move. He didn't even blink. "I gave you a command, Wei dog," the crown prince barked, raising his hand to strike Rong across the face. Before the crown prince's hand could even fall, Jin moved. It was blindingly fast. Jin grabbed the crown prince's wrist in a crushing grip, stopping the slap in midair. The music abruptly stopped. The dancers froze. The entire hall went dead silent. "Touch him," Jin whispered, his voice dangerously soft, "and I will cut off this hand, brother or not." The crown prince paled, trying to pull his hand back, but Jin's grip was like iron. "You dare threaten me? Over a whore of a fallen kingdom?" Jin stood up, towering over his brother, slowly twisting the wrist until the crown prince let out a gasp of pain. "He is no whore. He is a prince of Wei, and he is mine. Walk away, brother, before I forget my manners." Jin shoved the crown prince backward, sending him tumbling into a table of fruit and wine. The emperor slammed his fist onto his throne. "Enough!" "Jin, sit down. Crown prince, return to your seat. We are here to celebrate, not to brawl like street thugs." Jin slowly sat back down, his chest heaving slightly. He reached under the table, finding Rong's trembling hand hidden beneath the long, sheer sleeves of his robe. Jin gripped Rong's hand tightly, his thumb rubbing comforting circles into his skin. Rong looked at him, his eyes wide, a storm of emotion swirling in his chest. Jin had just humiliated the future emperor to protect him. He had risked everything. but the danger of the night was not over. A palace servant nervously approached their table, carrying a silver tray with a single, ornate jade cup of wine. A gift from the crown prince, to Prince Jin. To apologize for the misunderstanding, the servant stammered. Jin stared at the cup. He reached out to take it. Rong's sharp eyes caught something. The servant's hand was shaking violently, and there was a tiny, almost invisible trace of blue powder on the rim of the jade cup. Heart-piercing poison. A poison used by the royal assassins of Yan. Just as Jin raised the cup to his lips, Rong lunged. "No," Rong shouted. He slammed his body into Jin, knocking the jade cup from his hand. The cup shattered against the floor, the wine sizzling and burning a black hole into the polished wood. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards rushed in, but Rong didn't care. He was kneeling over Jin, his hands desperately gripping Jin's robes, checking him for any spilled wine. "Are you hurt? Did it touch you?" Rong asked, his voice cracking with sheer panic. Jin stared up at Rong, his heart pounding, completely ignoring the screaming nobles and the rushing guards. In that moment of life and death, Rong hadn't thought of his ruined kingdom. He hadn't thought of escape. He had thrown his own body into the path of poison to save the man who conquered him. Jin reached up, cupping the back of Rong's head, pulling him down until their foreheads rested against each other. "I'm fine," Jin breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm fine, my wild orchid, because of you." And if you are enjoying this forbidden royal tension, remember, the extended, deeply uncensored 18+ continuation of these stories is available right now on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. If you want to know what happens when they finally cross that line in the dark of the palace, the link is in the description and pinned comment. Let's get back to the story. The assassination attempt changed everything. The emperor, forced to save face in front of the court, executed the servant and banished the crown prince to his estate for a month. But everyone knew the truth. The emperor wanted Jin dead too. Jin's military power was too great. That night, back in the safety of Jin's heavily guarded estate, the tension that had been building between them for months finally shattered. It was raining again, a heavy, violent spring storm. Rong was in his chamber, pacing the floor. His blood was still rushing with adrenaline. He couldn't stop thinking about the poison. He couldn't stop thinking about how close he had come to losing Jin. Losing him. The realization hit Rong like a physical blow. When had he started fearing for his captor's life? When had the cold, terrifying Iron Dragon become the only person in the world who made Rong feel safe? Who made him feel alive? The sliding door slammed open. Jin stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone from the rain, his chest heaving. He didn't say a word. He just stepped into the room, slid the door shut, and locked it. Rong stopped pacing. He stared at Jin, his heart hammering against his ribs. Jin walked toward him, his dark eyes burning with a dangerous, unrestrained fire. The mask was completely gone. This wasn't the Prince of Yan. This was a man pushed to the absolute edge of his sanity. "You saved my life," Jin said, his voice a ragged whisper. "I did," Rong replied, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain beating against the roof. Jin stopped right in front of him. Water dripped from his dark hair onto the floor. "Why, Rong? Why did you do it? You hate me. You should have let me drink it. You would have been free." Rong looked up into those dark, tortured eyes. He felt a tear slip down his own cheek. He hated himself for it, but he couldn't hold it back anymore. The walls he had built around his heart were crumbling into dust. "I don't hate you," Rong whispered, his voice breaking. "I tried to. I swear to the gods, I tried so hard, but I can't. I can't hate you, Jin." Jin let out a choked sound, a mixture of a sigh and a sob. He reached out, grabbing the lapels of Rong's robes, and pulled him in. There was no hesitation this time, no pulling back. Jin's mouth crashed down onto Rong's. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, fueled by months of suppressed desire, fear, and longing. Rong gasped against Jin's lips, his eyes fluttering shut as he instantly surrendered. He threw his arms around Jin's neck, pulling him closer, kissing him back with just as much fierce, painful need. Jin groaned deep in his chest. His large hands slid from Rong's chest down to his waist, gripping him tightly, lifting him slightly off the floor. Rong tangled his fingers into Jin's wet hair, tilting his head to deepen the kiss. It tasted of rain, salt, and something intoxicatingly sweet. They stumbled backward, clinging to each other, knocking over a wooden screen before falling onto the soft mattress of Rong's bed. Jin hovered over him, his heavy body pressing Rong down into the silk sheets. He broke the kiss just long enough for them to catch their breath. They stared at each other in the dim candlelight, their chests heaving in unison. Jin reached down, gently tracing the soft curve of Rong's bottom lip with his thumb. "Do you know how long I have wanted to do that?" Jin whispered, his eyes dark and heavy with lust. "Since the day I saw you on the battlefield. You were covered in blood, fighting like a demon, and all I wanted was to take you away and keep you for myself." Rong shivered, arching his back slightly into Jin's touch. "You are insane." "I am," Jin agreed, burying his face into the crook of Rong's neck, pressing hot, open-mouthed kisses against his pulse point. "I am completely insane for you." That night, the storm raged outside, but inside the pavilion, the world ceased to exist. There were no empires, no fallen kingdoms, no emperors or politics. There were only two men, tangled in silken shadows, finding warmth in the ruins of their lives. But morning always comes, and with morning comes reality. 2 weeks later, an imperial edict arrived at Jin's estate, written in gold ink and stamped with the emperor's red seal. Rong was in the library when he heard the commotion. He walked out to the courtyard, hiding behind a wooden pillar, and watched as the imperial eunuch read the scroll aloud to a kneeling Jin. "By the will of the heavens, His Imperial Majesty decrees that Prince Jin shall take a principal wife. The daughter of the Grand Chancellor, Lady Mei, has been chosen. The wedding will take place in 1 month. Furthermore, the hostage Prince of Wei is ordered to be transferred to the imperial dungeons, as he has become an inappropriate distraction to the prince." Rong's blood ran cold. The emperor was making his move. He was tying Jin to a powerful noble family to control him, and getting rid of Rong in the process. He knew Jin would never agree to the marriage as long as Rong was there. Jin slowly stood up. His face was devoid of all emotion. It was the terrifying mask of the Iron Dragon. "Tell my father," Jin said coldly to the eunuch, "that I accept the marriage." Rong felt the air leave his lungs. He stumbled backward, pressing his hand against his mouth to stop a sob from escaping. Jin accepted it. He was giving him up. Rong turned and fled back to his pavilion. He packed nothing. What was there to pack? He was a prisoner. He sat on the floor, staring blankly at the bamboo garden, waiting for the emperor's guards to come and drag him to the dungeons, to his death. Hours passed. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the floor. Suddenly, the door slid open. Rong didn't look up. "Are the guards here?" he asked quietly, his voice hollow. "There are no guards," Jin's voice replied. Rong looked up. Jin stood in the doorway, dressed not in his royal robes, but in his dark, terrifying battle armor. His sword was strapped to his waist. His expression was fierce, his jaw set in a hard line. Rong frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" "You accepted the edict, you're getting married." Jin stepped into the room, walking quickly toward Rong. He reached down, grabbing Rong by the arm and pulling him up against his armored chest. "Did you really think I would let them take you?" Jin said, his voice fierce and urgent. "Did you really think I would marry some woman and let you rot in a cell? But you told the eunuch." "I lied," Jin interrupted, his eyes burning. "I needed them to drop their guard. I needed my father to think he had won." Rong stared at him, his heart starting to race as he realized what Jin was wearing, battle armor, in the middle of the capital city. "Jin, what are you doing?" Rong whispered. Jin cupped Rong's face in his large, armored hands. "I am doing what I should have done years ago. I am taking the throne." Rong gasped. "Treason. It's treason. If you fail, they will execute you by 1,000 cuts." "Then I won't fail," Jin said fiercely. He leaned in, pressing a hard, desperate kiss to Rong's lips. "Listen to me. My loyal generals have surrounded the palace. We strike tonight. I am going to tear my father from his throne. I am going to execute my brother. And when the sun rises, I will be the emperor of Yan." Rong felt tears prick his eyes. "You are doing all this. For me?" "For us," Jin corrected gently, wiping a tear from Rong's cheek. "This empire has taken everything from both of us. It took your home. It took my humanity. It is time we take it back. Wait for me here, Rong. Do not leave this room. I will come back for you. I swear it on my life." Rong grabbed the front of Jin's armor, his knuckles white. "If you die, I will follow you to the underworld and kill you myself." Jin smiled. A true, genuine, beautiful smile. "I love you, my wild orchid. I will see you at dawn." Jin turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the falling dusk. That night, the capital burned. From his window, Rong could hear the distant sounds of clashing steel, war horns, and screams echoing from the imperial palace. The sky glowed an unnatural orange. Rong paced the floor for hours, his heart trapped in his throat. He prayed to gods he hadn't spoken to since his kingdom fell, begging them to protect the brutal, beautiful man he had fallen in love with. The hours bled into each other. Midnight passed, then the deepest hours of the night. Finally, the sky began to turn a pale, bruised purple. Dawn was coming. The sound of heavy, armored footsteps echoed on the wooden veranda. Rong froze. He held his breath. The sliding door slowly opened. Standing in the doorway was Jin. His armor was covered in blood. His dark hair was tied back, and he looked exhausted, battered, and bruised. He was breathing heavily, leaning slightly against the doorframe. But his eyes were bright, clear, and victorious. Rong let out a choked sob. He ran across the room, throwing himself into Jin's arms. Jin caught him, wrapping his powerful arms tightly around Rong's waist, burying his face in Rong's neck. They fell to their knees on the wooden floor, holding each other as if the world was ending, completely ignoring the blood and the dirt. "It's done," Jin whispered against Rong's skin, his voice trembling with exhaustion and relief. "It's over. The Emperor is dead. The Crown Prince is dead. The throne is mine." Rong pulled back just enough to look at Jin's face. He reached up, gently wiping a streak of blood from Jin's cheek. "You're safe," Rong cried, pressing his forehead against Jin's. "You came back to me." "I will always come back to you," Jin vowed, leaning in to kiss him softly, deeply, sealing a promise that would last a lifetime. "You are no longer a prisoner, Rong. You are no longer a hostage. You are the only person who will ever stand beside me, the only one who will ever share my throne." As the first rays of the morning sun broke through the clouds, washing the blood-stained capital in a warm golden light, the Iron Dragon held his beautiful, defiant prince in his arms. The cage was broken, and their true reign was just beginning. If you want the next part, the uncensored continuation, and more unlimited 18+ Ancient Royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. What happens in the Emperor's bedchambers after the battle is waiting for you there. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next story.